I'm Bable Jonathan, and this is the 6 p.m. primetime newscast on Equinoxe Television, live from our headquarters in Cameroon's economic capital, Douala. In our top stories in this edition of the news, the audit bench of the Supreme Court of the Republic of Cameroon reviews scandalous facts and figures on the mismanagement and embezzlement of COVID-19 funds. Huge sums of money embezzled and mismanaged by state officials. We bring to you details of the 23-page progress report of the audit bench of the Supreme Court on the management of COVID-19 funds in the Republic of Cameroon. The country celebrates what is today qualified by critics, observers, and analysts as a limping and to an extent non-existent national unity, seriously affected by the ongoing 5-year long armed conflict in the northwest and southwest regions. Stay with us. We begin this newscast in the southwest region of the Republic of Cameroon, one of the two English-speaking regions of the country affected by the 5-year or close to 5-year-long armed conflict going on in the northwest and southwest regions of the country. In that region, the National Unity Day celebration was adversely, of course, marred to an extent by the armed conflict going on there. Deserted streets marked the celebration of this edition of the National Unity Day on May 20. And Derek Jato, Pharisee details from the southwest region.
With street almost deserted for fear of the unknown in this Anglophone region, as the nation observed the 2021 edition of its National Day in a symbolic manner. From Mundemba, the divisional headquarters of Ndian Division, to Ekondo Titi, one of the subdivisions of the said division, the flag, the identity of the nation was hoisted under the special supervision of administrative and local authorities and in the presence of some elite. Times are challenging. The health situation per the government has caged the nation in this way. 20th of May is a national day in Cameroon, a day that brings memories of two states that came together as one nation. And today in the Anglophone regions, some say the 20th of May instead brings back bad memories and regret. The need for peace and unity for a better Cameroon was on the lips of authorities of the southwest region this day as they battle with increasing tension planted by separatist fighters.
And there are questions being raised by critics, analysts, and other observers concerning the date, May 20, chosen to celebrate the unity of the country instead of 1st of October, which is the day the two parts came together, reunited to become one nation. And we talked to a history researcher in the University of Boya. Take a listen to him.
I'm called Gento. I'm a master's student in history at the University of Boya. I'm a researcher in history. I'm also a teacher with the lay private sector in some secondary school in Boya in Douala. It is very relevant that it's the National Unity Day. But notwithstanding, critics or pro-federalists keep on asking why this day, especially pro-federalists of North and South, who question why this day, why celebration of the National Unity Day on the 20th of May 1972. Given that in 1961, between 1961 and 1972, which was the Federal Republic of Cameroon, the pro-federalists said that had it been the federation remained up to date, there won't have been any Anglophone crisis. So they keep questioning why Cameroon was changed, or why Cameroonians massively voted for Cameroon to be changed from federal to unitary. So pro-federalists questioned Article 47 of the Cameroon Federal Constitution of 1961, which state that nothing should be done to tamper with the Federal Republic of Cameroon. But to an extent, this Article 47 of the Cameroon Federal Constitution a bit clash with Article 2, which gives people the right through sovereignty, through referendum, or through the assembly, to touch the constitution.
That was Gentle, a history researcher in the University of Boyer, speaking there about the date May 20 and 1st of October 1961. And of course, there are other schools of thought that highlight the point that 1st of October, which is the day the federal system was abolished, the two-state system was abolished, and a unitary state adopted in a referendum, should have been the appropriate day to be celebrated as the National Unity Day. We're going to talk about that in this edition of the 6 p.m. newscast. Time for us to take some inhabitants of the town of Douala who talk to us about the National Unity Day, and this is what they think about May 20.
This National Unity Day in Cameroon, it doesn't really mean to be, because we are marginalized. It's a reality. We are just two regions, Anglophone regions. The rest of the country is Francophone, which represent 8 regions. For me, initially, there's no equality. We cannot think of rebuilding the Nozo when war is still going on. Killings are still going on. We didn't get up one day and say, okay, we are doing war or we are killing people. No, we started very peacefully, but the government seems not to consider us. The real remedy for me is to consider what Anglophone are fighting for since 5 years now, because let the government consider what us Anglophone are fighting for ever since.
That National Day symbolizes unification between both Cameroonian, those who speak English and those who speak French. In this year especially, we have many problems like Anglophone craze who impact this unification. It's good to begin the reconstruction of those regions and favorize the return of those who speak English who are in the French zone. Government should do again to resolve that problem.
In the absence of a State of the Union address of the President of the Republic, Paul Biya, Professor Maurice Kamto, National President of the Cameroon Renaissance Movement, CRM political party, makes a statement taking a look at the state of the nation today and all the issues badly affecting the unity of the country. Details in this report compiled by Fomi Armstrong Sander.
The national president of the Cameroon Renaissance Movement's political party began his speech by praising the courage of the soldiers engaged in various fronts in and out of Cameroon, particularly citing those fighting the terrorist group Boko Haram in the Far North region and soldiers engaged in the war front in the Anglophone Northwest and Southwest regions of Cameroon. The opposition party leader then called for a reforms of the national defense policy. Maurice Kamto says Cameroon's defense and security policy must be part of a double logic internally. On one hand, that of overcoming divisions and identity faults in all their forms, and on the other hand, that of the lasting rooting of peace and democratic culture in the whole nation. These, according to him, must be the major goals of nation building. To Maurice Kamto, a defense and security policy that does not place people at the heart of its concerns has little chance of achieving the strategic and operational objectives it pursues. In a line of batteries of proposals to a better Cameroon, Maurice Kamto suggests the amendment of the law of 1967 on the general organization of the defense. He said the adoption of a law on the award of nation is, as he has seen on several occasions, an imperative and an emergency, questioning if it is normal that the minor orphans, children of men and women who died for the nation, are abandoned to their fate. He, however, thinks that it is urgent for the state to take charge of the education and the health costs of minor children whose parents have lost their lives under the flag of Cameroon. While acknowledging cases of abuse and other blunders and callings for sanctions when necessary, Maurice Kamto praised the professionalism of the Cameroonian soldiers. for having had the honor and the privilege of working with some of its components on vital issues of the interest of Cameroon. He says he knows and always said that Cameroonian army is one of the best trained and most professional of the continent, Africa.
For me, Armstrong Sander reporting there, and he has experienced the heat of the Anglophone crisis. He is a craftsman in the northwest region of the Republic of Cameroon, and with regards to the damaging and deadly consequences of the crisis which he and other inhabitants of those two regions have suffered and are still suffering, he makes proposals concerning national unity, inclusive dialogue, and living together in a piece of artwork which he traveled all the way from Bamenda, from the northwest region, to Douala to hand over to Equinoxe Television in recognition of the work being done by the People's Channel. Details in this report compiled by Immaculate Fogwe.
For close to 5 years, the unity of Cameroon has been threatened by a peaceful protest which later degenerated into an armed conflict in the northwest and southwest regions. National Unity Day, celebrated every May 20th in Cameroon, has been described by observers as limping or non-existent, given the fact that unity is seriously affected by the raging conflict in the northwest and southwest regions. A victim of this crisis narrates his ordeals.
When you go to the northwest now, you go to Bamenda main market, you find little children there, talk, brr, brr. Some are even falling down without hearing anything. When rain backs that like that, you see children cry. That is the mentality of these children have been upsetted. All the killings and all these refugee people going up and down, suffering, we are suffering. 3 bullets of the Amoka missed me in Bafut. Look at my neck here. I have a hunchback on my neck, Mr. Babila. And then when you look at my head, I see I have a horn of which all these things must go down from me. They even broke down my house.
This artistic piece, created by Yancho Guapayos, a native of Bafut in the northwest region, paints a vivid picture on how inclusive dialogue should look like.
You find 2 hands are greeting, and the 2 very hands are covering, and then we have 1 red cat in the middle. That is inclusive. We must have somebody, a foreigner, I can say it, to join this hand greeting here, so that people should be sure that what is coming, what has come to us, war, as they call it war, which I don't think of it, will no more repeat itself. The hands are still down here to take it and receive it and give it down.
In his opinion, all these preconditions can be achieved through proper consideration of the moral code of conduct.
That to my country we need, I say we need, I still repeat 3 times, we need peace, love, unity, truth, humble, togetherness, patience, and freedom. For a better Cameroon tomorrow, Cameroonians can live together if the head of state, because everything is the person handling the knife and the yam.
In the meantime, artists are suffering not only because of the security crisis, but equally because of the health crisis, which has further paralyzed their sector.
I put up after when I heard of the agricultural show in Bolowa was there for long. They postponed it for long. Even up to today, look at SIAC. It's not going on because of COVID-19. What are we craft people doing? How are we living? We don't live. I've been suffering since 2 or 3 years today. Their artwork flop. This is just part of what I've been working for long.
While expecting solutions for the security and health crisis, he's also hoping that the First Lady Chantal Biya, who he handed a piece of art to during a pastoral show in Ebolowa, will be able to come to their aid.
A very nice bamboo traditional chair which I work. Fortunately, I was selected to go to agricultural show in Ebolowa. When the First Lady came, greeted me, I handed this chair to herself. She called for a protocol with a big car to come and carry these things and went with. So they said they will see me since up to today. It may be the person that she has sent to see me has never seen me.
He brought this work of art, carrying this message to recognize the professionalism of the media house.
Equinoxe, what I'm presenting to Equinoxe is because I don't know how I can carve a cup of competition and give to Equinoxe, because I've been following Equinoxe for long. Equinoxe is somebody who speaks the people's message as they come. Equinoxe is a studio where he does not just present nonsense to people. He gives to people what the people want. That's where I know of Equinoxe, and I give them gladly.
Acknowledging the efforts made by Equinoxe Radio and Television in the dissemination of facts and happenings ongoing in the conflict-hit regions and the rest of the country, civil society activists continue to re-echo the need for government to carry out an inclusive dialogue in order to end the war.
Now we bring to you details on mismanagement and embezzlement of COVID-19 funds contained in a 23-page progress report of the audit bench of the Supreme Court of the Republic of Cameroon. That report reveals that some government officials have embezzled and mismanaged huge sums of money that were meant for the fight against the coronavirus in Cameroon. Details with Equinoxe.
A 23-page progress report from the Audit Chamber on the mismanagement of COVID-19 fund in Cameroon identifies some few major points which remain preoccupying. It reveals that the criteria for selecting service providers and the conditions under which the special contracts were awarded to them were unknown to the Audit Chamber, which reflects a certain opacity. Acquisition of personal protective equipment (PPE). The unfinished report notes cost damage of close to 1.3 billion francs CFA to the state of Cameroon. Commitments for the acquisition of PPE, which were to amount to 2,941,000,000 francs CFA, were made to the tune of over 23 billion francs CFA. That is a surplus of over 20 billion. Regarding the strengthening of barrier measures, an activity budgeted at 70 million francs CFA. As of December 31st, 2020, close to 400 million francs CFA had been spent for the benefits of the company. Asante Media Group awarded 3 contracts. The lack of objectivity of the Ministry of Trade in validating the proposed price made by the Ministry of Public Health on COVID-19 screening tests was also projected in the report. Regarding the institution of quarantine centers in low-cost houses, 7 centers were rehabilitated instead of 11 in Olembe. Fictitious orders and services were recorded as an amount of nearly 134 million francs CFA. The company, Your Farm, was awarded the contract for the delivery of 8 medical ambulances, even though it was not on the list of pre-qualified providers. Obscurity surrounded the acquisition of medical equipment for the care of COVID-19 patients. The Audit Chamber says it noted the consistency for 2 service providers between fields and subfields of activity of the list of service providers retained in the Minsante's file. Actual activities declared to the Ministry of Trade. In addition, 27 unrecorded markets for a loss of more than 75 million francs CFA. Talking about management of hygiene and sanitation, contracts for Yaoundé have been awarded up to 157 million to African Distribution Company, a company created on January 14th, 2020, with no experience in trades of the hygiene and sanitation. Regarding the production of chloroquine and azithromycin, more than 4 billion francs CFA was budgeted. The Ministry of Scientific Research and Innovation did not start local manufacturing, but the acquisition in India of 5 million tablets and sticks labels from Cameroon on them. The Audit Chamber noted 30 mismanagement misconduct procedures by officials of the Ministry of Public Health and the Ministry of Scientific Research and Innovation, and recommends the opening of 10 proceedings concerning facts that may constitute offences against criminal law. It should be noted that after having transmitted to President Paul Biya this first summary note, the audit chamber continued its investigations, which are almost certainly completed, and had to integrate new elements following the new revelations which appeared on the embezzlement of COVID-19 funds.
The divisional officer of Douala 5 subdivision and other administrative authorities in the littoral region, led by Governor Samuel Dieudonné Vahadibo, have launched what they qualify as a merciless war against illegal sale of drugs. Speaking to reporters, the divisional officer of Douala 5 indicated that the illegal sale of drugs and consequently, and of course, the consumption of those drugs is responsible to a higher extent for the change in behavioral patterns of young people, including students who are often involved in violent and deadly actions. Smanjikan Gabriel reports.
The sale of drugs in our market by persons who are at times unqualified to render the services has led to the increasing rate of youth delinquency, especially those still in colleges.
We have realized that in schools today, our children are influenced by drugs to do terrible things, like acting pornography films, stealing, and all the rest. Even this phenomenon of criminals grouping up themselves in what they call in French microbe in Douala, it is due to the consumption of these drugs. And where do these drugs come from? They are not bought from the pharmacy. They are bought from people who are dealing illegally and supplying them with these drugs.
With instructions from his hierarchy, the divisional officer of Douala 5 formed a committee to follow up the situation. Some stores were later sealed, but the owners forcefully opened them in the Bonamusadi market.
Those who have found themselves in the sector by nature or by chance should rapidly transform their business. They should change the business and do some other thing which is lucrative and legal, because the fight that we have started is not going to be the one to end now. The governor of the littoral region, His Excellency Samuel Ibaha is very categorical that we have to do everything for this phenomenon to stop.
To the vendors, the divisional officer was very categorical, saying the fight won't come to an end that soon.
I want to call on the population to be vigilant, to support us in this operation. Those who think that they have the means to come and buy us, let them know in advance that we are not negotiating this.
Before he went to the Bonamusadi market, Asongwe Cletus held a meeting with some vendors who were planning a protest demonstration because their stores were sealed, to caution them on the punishment that could be meted to them if found guilty.
Now to Somaliland, from where a special envoy Stella files in details on the celebration of the 30 years of independence of that country from Somalia. Her report.
Over 80% of these buildings have been constructed in the last 30 years. Between 1987 and 1989, 90% of the city was bombarded in what is described as a state-sponsored massacre of civilians in the northern region of Somalia, also known as Somaliland. Hundreds of thousands were killed and more than 500,000 others displaced. The city of Hargeisa, capital of Somaliland, was brought down, and this aircraft Somalilanders say was used. It took off from the airport and later bombarded major structures including hospitals, schools and mosques. A monument on which it will now rest, serving as a reminder of the atrocities of the former Somalia regime.
We want to record the good things that happened, that our ancestors and every generation put in the history book, in order that we can repeat and build on that. At the same time, we want to record the bad things that happened in a way that it doesn't come back in another form, in another shape.
Somaliland is regarded in the outside world as a semi-autonomous region of Somalia, but it considers itself as an independent nation, and that is what it wants the world to believe. The territory in the Horn of Africa has its own constitution, its own parliament, its own currency, the Somaliland shillings, and for over 30 years has been waiting for any nation to call them free, and for these 30 years, the government of the world have turned a blind eye on their recognition request.
haddaba dunida oo dhan waxaan faraynaa inay fariintan naga qabtaan oo ay arkaan quruxda ay leeyihiin iyo burburkaan ama mid ka baysa maanta soddon laga joogayna aanu intii ilaa boqolkiiba boqol ku sidii.
At 84 years old, I will see the recognition of Somaliland, and I pray, inshallah, that I will see that. That would be the biggest gift, because we have earned it, because we deserve it.
This May, they celebrate 30 years of development without foreign aid and waiting to be recognized.
The celebration of Somaliland at 30 is born of the usual parade and fanfare characterized previous celebrations. The coronavirus pandemic is determining how events now run across the globe.
Stella reporting there. Coming up next, Talking Point. Today we are receiving a historian and civil society leader, Gilbert Gimdo. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Mr. Babla. Thank you. Good evening, televiewers, and thank you for being with you once again. Thank you.
Despite the COVID-19, Cameroon is celebrating Unity Day today, and there are no parades because of the coronavirus. No activities, or the usual activities were not observed. However, today is National Unity Day. Are you celebrating?
Well, definitely the parades were not supposed to be. I think I side with the President of the Republic on decreeing parades not to have happened today, because parades will certainly have resulted to a lot of entangling among the population, which may have propagated to some extent unneeded. The virus, which is very much scared, and which the government is so much interested in limiting its spread in Cameroon. But then we come back to the very essence of unity. The question you've asked, whether I am celebrating or not. The answer to that question depends on every Cameroonian, and it depends on the context to which you want the answer fitted, because the answer I will give you, I may give you here, will not be the same answer the next Cameroonian will give you, will not be the same answer a Cameroonian from the northwest, from the southwest, from the west region, and other parts of the country will give you, because the issue of national unity in Cameroon has become something so much questionable that sometimes when we sit on the 20th of May is coming, so many questions come. People get annoyed, people get worried, and those who have decided to continue to promote personalities instead of institutions in this country will continue to believe in what the personalities will say instead of what the statehood, what has to be of a country is supposed to be.
Now let's look at historical facts.
Yep.
May 20. National Unity Day. October 1, the day the federal system, in which there were two separate states in the same country, was abolished, and a unitary system that merged, that deleted the lines between the two parts. Historically, which is more important in these two dates?
Yeah, thank you. Let me start by making a correction of what you just said. October 1 was not when the unitary state was abolished. October 1 was when the federal state came into functioning when the federal constitution was signed by President Ahijo on September 30th, 1961, and it started functioning on October 1, 1960.
Right, thank you for that correction. That is the British Southern Cameroon's changed status from a trusteeship territory under British administration to a federal state within the Cameroon that we have today. That was on October 1, 1961. Right, thank you.
To be very precise, from UNO Trust Territory of Southern Cameroon to State of West Cameroon, following the federal constitution drawn up in Fumban, or declared in Fumban on July 21st, 1961, and then the only tripartite that took place in August 1961, polished up by integrating other issues like currency, like Southern Cameroon, workers in Nigeria who weren't there by then, and how their status will be when they come back. So all those were brought up and polished in the only tripartite of August 1961, and the constitution itself was signed on September 30th, 1961, and it went into function on midnight of September 30th, getting to October 1st, 1961. That was when, on midnight 1st September, the British Commissioner for Southern Cameroon handed the independence document to President Ahijo, and then the Union Jack flag was brought down in Southern Cameroon, meaning that independence of Southern Cameroon has been declared, and simultaneously in reunification with the Republic of Cameroon. That's why the simultaneous nature was the reason for giving the independence document to Ahijo, because of the simultaneous independence and reunification, which came October 1st. Now, from October 1st, federal system was born, and then it had to evolve across the 1960s to
right up to 1972 on May 20th,
yep.
On the day the Cameroonians voted in a referendum to abolish the federal system, to delete the federal lines and get into a unitary state.
Yeah, like I said, when the federal system evolved towards the early 70s, a lot of things happened. Those things that happened were both in East Cameroon and in West Cameroon. You see, let me begin from East Cameroon. But before I go on, historians will bear witness with me that historians to any level will bear witness with me that the federal government or the federal system of government was to Ahijo as a temporal issue, was like a bridge to get to somewhere. It has hypothetical. It means to get to an end. Historians will bear witness on that. It means to get to an end. When you look at the draft constitutions that came to the Fumban conference, the draft constitution from the Bamenda All-Party Conference that sat from 26 to 28 of June 1961, and then Ahijo's modified constitution of the Republic of Cameroon that came together. And when you put the two drafts together, and what came up as the federal constitution was more than 90%, to be clear to you, more than 90% reflecting the the modified constitution of the Republic of Cameroon, especially when it came to specific decisions that had to do with the integrity of the state, the future of the state, the weight on which the state had to do. For example, you have to do with the nature of the union, you have to do with the nature of the legislature, have to do with the nature of the executive, the powers that the executive had to do, the powers that institutions that hold every nation had to do with, because every nation that proves democratic builds institutions. It doesn't build personalities, and that's not what the federal constitution in Cameroon did. The federal constitution constructed very high, very powerful personalities whose image and whose power, whose authority was more than the institutions that the state had to depend on, and which was contrary to even France that gave independence to the Republic of Cameroon, and Britain that gave independence to Southern Cameroon. I'll give you an example. When you look at Ahidjo, who was given centralized executive powers, considered as head of state, head of government, head of magistracy, head of legislature, head of magistracy, and then commander-in-chief of the army. These are things that are rare to find in a country that is really democratic, the countries that really value institutions. When you look at the 1787 Constitution of the United States that was drawn up from 1787 to where we talk now, that Constitution has been modified severally. But then there are specific issues that hold the integrity of the United States, institutions that rule the United States, that nothing can touch them. Articles in the 1787 Constitution. That Constitution till today is called the 1787 Constitution because it was drawn up by patriots who had the United States at heart, that had the America at heart. And that's why certain things that can touch the integrity of the United States of America cannot be tampered with. They can go ahead and tamper with methods by which elections are held and other ways. But when it comes to what has to do with the executive, the legislature, the judiciary of the United States, and subsidiaries like the education system and others, qualities that the United States depend on to weigh on the whole world, to prove that it is the power that rules the whole world, those are issues that the Constitution cannot even touch it. Any person can do anything. But when you come to Cameroon, the federal Constitution in itself, the error it did was it gave Ahidjo executive powers that permitted Ahidjo himself to touch the Constitution at will. And that is why in 1972, 2nd May, Ahidjo single-handedly consults Parliament, the 50-man Parliament, where West Cameroon had 10 out of 50. East Cameroon had 40 out of 50. He single-handedly consults that he wishes that the state should move further, and that the federation is already proven outdated, looking at the inconveniences it is giving to Cameroonians. Well, what he promised Cameroonians was the negative parts of the federation. He did not in any way tell Cameroonians how positive the federation has been to Cameroonians, how positive the federation has been to any of the two states or the federal government itself. And when he did that, he put in place some measures. He adopted measures which were very strategic. I'll give you just two. One, in West Cameroon, we are in 1972. In West Cameroon, to prepare what was materializing in 1972, started from 1968, when the lone, strong West Cameroonian who was bent on defending the institutions and the status quo of West Cameroon within the federation, that was Augustine Gomjo, was ousted suddenly, embarrassingly, disgracefully in January 1968 and replaced by a gullible Estimona. Why do we call him gullible? I am not the only one calling him gullible. It is because all West Cameroonians, by 1968, from 1963, West Cameroonians were describing him as the federal man. The meaning of federal man means Ahidjo's man. That means that the state as a whole, take into consideration the integrity, the uniqueness of their institutions, the uniqueness of their values, did not want a person of that status quo to be at the helm because he risked submerging it under federal control, which was no longer profitable to West Cameroon or protective to West Cameroon.
Right.
So in 1968, he surprisingly pushed Joa out and brought him in. And in 1970, let me just calm down. In 1970, in order to make sure that Joa, who he threw out in 1968, doesn't come back to power, because he was very aware of the prestige of Joa in West Cameroon, the popularity of Joa in West Cameroon. In order to prevent that, he dropped Foncha, the last of those who said, "Oh, sorry, I accepted one party in 1960 without knowing. I accepted this without knowing. Now it is getting to a situation where my people are going to get me blamed for nothing." So Ahidjo understood, and he now considered J.N. Foncha as the last stumbling block in his cabinet. What did he do? He proposed because in the rubber stamp parliament, called a rubber stamp because it was first and foremost all dominated by UC, and on one side KNDP, who were still subsets of the UC. So when he proposed that, what happened was that he proposed that he wants to run with ST Mona. He could no longer run with
and he continued with
Foncha in the second place. He could no longer run with Foncha because he was already seeing Foncha as an obstacle. So he proposed running with Foncha, with ST Mona, knowing very well that running with ST Mona cannot be possible if ST Mona is not the vice president. So he proposed ST Mona, dropped Foncha, and then modified the constitution to permit ST Mona cumulate the post of vice president of the Federal Republic and Prime Minister of West Cameroon, something that was anti-constitutional, and what has removed Foncha from the post of Prime Minister of West Cameroon in 1965.
And today the question, in some few seconds, we are rounding up with the permission of technicians behind the cameras. There are two things that happened on the 1st of October and on the 20th of May. On the 20th of May 1972, there was a referendum, and the people decided to abolish the federal lines and merge the two parts completely. And in October 1961, the two parts came together in a federal system, but were still divided by a federal line. When you look at these two dates, which of them should actually be the National Unity Day? Is it 20th of May or 1st of October?
Without mincing words, the 1st of October is the date Cameroonians, or from all angles, will feel comfortable celebrating. I'll give you just some few reasons. The first reason is that it is the date that people who were divided for more than half a century decided to come together. They decided, I won't tell you that only West Cameroonians decided to meet with their Francophone brothers, even Francophone brothers, because campaigns were in French Cameroon. Campaigns went
so in your opinion,
you find Sopopo Priso removing money and sponsoring the Cameroon Times, the lone KNDP newspaper in southern Cameroon. Ahidjo meeting with Foncha in Boya, meeting with him in Konsamba, meeting with him in Yaoundé, severally in secret meetings to build up how they will come together. Although let me say this, he was disappointed because his brothers in North Cameroon had disappointed him by joining Nigeria, and he was frustrated. That's why he came down this way. These are hard facts. People will not want to hear, but let me take the pains to say it and bear the responsibility.
All right, so to you, 1st of October.
1st of October is a day it is supposed to be celebrated because it's a day that people who suffered for a long time under different heritage managed to come together.
Given a historian and civil society leader who certainly have the opportunity at the weekend to come back on this with greater details. Stay with us. Equinoxe is up next.